Happy Monday morning, YouTube. This is Dave Croft. First, I hope you are doing well. I hope that you had a fantastic week 11. And I know that this week is going to be absolutely fantastic for you. I appreciate you joining me today. This is my week 11 recap for my 52 Qs challenge. It's not really a challenge, it's just I set out to write at least one Q every week and talk about that Q here on YouTube, as well as go over any kind of life lessons or morals or anything that I'm kind of just percolating in my psyche, my soul, my spirit, whatever. And so this Q that we're listening to right now, it's called Drone and Dusted. And it is an ominous, intense, really kind of distorted tension cue. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute. If you want to skip over the vlog portion and just get on with the cue, you can click on the time code in the bottom description below, so you can check that out. Also, before we get too deep into it, I want to first thank all of my patrons, my Patreon patrons, for continuing to support the channel. If you want to do that, you can check out the information below. Our patron level is just $1, and it helps keeps the channel going, as well as you get access to my weekly live streams. I live stream every Thursday, where I write a cue from scratch, really kind of starting from a blank canvas and going from there. Again, channeling my inner Bob Ross. Also, last week we had our first Friday feedback session, and that was streamed on YouTube here as well. That was for everybody or any of the members of the 52 Qs Facebook group. We had a fantastic time, got through several Qs, and I was able to hear some really, really amazing work and provide feedback for those 52 Qs members. So if you are interested in the next one, which I know we're going to be having soon, you can join the 52 Qs Facebook group, link below in the description, and be on the lookout for that announcement. So what I really kind of took away from this past week is has to do with the cue that I wrote, this Drone and Dusted cue, because it's admittedly kind of unlike much of what I really write. My wheelhouse tends to be kind of orchestral or even hip hop, which I know are kind of two sides of a coin. But I write a lot of urban contemporary and epic orchestral type hip hop, and I also do orchestral type cues, kind of trailery type stuff, but also uplifting, inspirational. Here, I wrote several Americana cues. Also am in the middle of these happy clappy cues, a lot of Thomas Newman-esque type things. Thomas Newman's my man. I don't know him, but I really am inspired by him. He's one of my big influences. Danny Elfman, also a really big influence. Classical composers like Beethoven, Stravinsky, these all have very big influences on me. And so last week I had the opportunity to start writing these really heavily distorted electronic type scores. And I don't mean like EDM scores, but pushing into this new territory. These are going to be scores inspired by soundtracks like from Tenet, soundtracks like even kind of going into like The Dark Knight, which is Hans Zimmer territory, and just trying these new, really heavily distorted, unapologetically synthetic type soundtrack cues. And so this is somewhat newer territory for me. It's related somewhat to the tension cues I already write, these investigation crime type tension cues, but usually those types of cues don't call for this unapologetically distorted sound. And so this is kind of new territory for me, relatively new. And it really got me thinking about a post that I saw on the Perspective Forum, which is a Facebook group that is moderated and attended by some really high-end Hollywood level media composers, film composers. And one of the posts and one of the big contributors to that Facebook group, and again, it's called Perspective, I believe the full title of the group is Perspective, a Forum for Film, TV, and Media Composers. I would definitely encourage you to check that out, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes or the the description below. But one of the primary contributors to that group is Richard Kraft, who is an A-list Hollywood agent for composers. Name a composer, he's probably representing them actively or has represented them. Just a quick overview, just Christoph Beck, Marco Beltrami, Bruce Broughton, John Debney, Danny Elfman, Alan Menken, Henry Jackman, Mark Isham, and that's just like the first half of the alphabet. My point is that here is an agent and a Hollywood professional at the absolute top of his game. And he's on the forum and he's asking questions. He starts out and says, instead of being a Mr. Smarty Pants know-it-all, I'd really appreciate learning more from this group's experience regarding licensing of music via music libraries. And then he goes on to ask 8 questions. And that really struck a chord with me, because here is a person, top of his game, with not just the humility to ask a question in a very public way, on a very public forum, but also just recognizing that he doesn't know everything, and there are still aspects of the industry that he can learn about. And that was super inspiring to me. And I even posted something. I was like, my takeaway is that you're still asking questions. And that cuts to the heart of what this week's kind of lesson was about, which is we are always students of this craft. Regardless of whatever level of success you achieve, I achieve. Richard Kraft of Kraft Engel Management, always a student. We are always learning. There are always edges of the map to be explored. We never really truly arrive, or at least I feel like I don't, and I think he would say the same thing. In fact, the more you learn about an industry, kind of the more you realize you don't know about the industry or how big it is and how much there is always to explore. Now, I know a lot of current and former students watch the channel. Hey guys, hang in there. I know it can be tough sometimes. And I know when you are a student, you're really plugging along and you're aiming for that graduation date. And you're thinking, when I graduate, then things are going to take off and then I can put all of the school business aside and I can get on with my professional career. Well, spoiler alert, you will never, ever stop studying. You will never, ever not have homework. You will never, ever not be doing research for something. This past week, I'm helping my church's AV team get bringing in virtual hybrid, like live service, plus bringing in Zoom calls and on the screen and everything. And so I've spent the better part of last week learning all about like NDI and video across and vMix, passing video and audio between computers over the network, upgrading my channel here with, cool lights and new cameras and getting into YouTube algorithms and all of that. And that's all a huge learning process. And it can absolutely feel like school. So when the pastor says, hey, I want to bring Zoom callers who are attending a Zoom class into the sanctuary live, and I want that to be on the screen, and I want to be able to talk to them. And by the way, we only have this equipment and this budget, and I had to do my research. And I still don't entirely have it figured out. I'm still working on it. It's a lot of YouTube videos. It's a lot of asking questions. It's a lot of going either onto forums or finding friends I know in the industry, and how do you solve this? So this cue that I put together this week, this drone and dusted, this whole new territory involved some research, involved educating myself about the sound, educating myself about what this is supposed to sound like. But there are always going to be aspects of the gig, aspects of either the compositional side of things, the technology side of things, or the industry, how the industry works with contracts and royalties and all of that. There is absolutely always something new to learn, and you will never stop being a student. And if you do stop being a student, if you or if you think you've got it all figured out and I have arrived and I don't need to study anymore, then you're going to absolutely find yourself just treading water and not really getting anywhere in your career. I would guess. I'm not trying to speak that into existence for you or whatever, but I have found that my career has stagnated when I've stopped learning new things. And if you don't enjoy the learning process, then this might be tough for you. This might be tough for you. But you're never you never stop being a student. If one of the biggest composing agents in Hollywood can go onto a forum and ask a ton of questions on an industry that I thought he'd have this totally sinking in music libraries. In terms of the hierarchy of media composers, like film composers, kind of, that's the holy grail, scoring Hollywood blockbusters or whatever, winning Oscars. And us library composers are down here kind of in the trenches, making cues for reality TV and, commercials. But here he is, educating himself well into a very established, successful career. So that was really inspiring for me and really got me thinking how we never stop being students of this. So with that, let's look at this week's cue, Drone and Dusted. So you'll see the initial takeaway from this is how just distorted it is, and that's part of the energy. This really intense energy of these types of cues are how distorted they are. I should also mention that this the references for this included, like I said, it included Tenet, I'm sorry, and also the Sicario soundtrack, which was, I believe, by Johan Johansson. Tenet, I believe, was Ludwig Göransson, and just really, really cool, distorted synthetic sounds, which of course meant a ton of omnisphere that's happening here. As a matter of fact, it's almost entirely omnisphere except for a couple of some contact libraries, which are using damage 2. And also included some reverse effects and some cymbal swells and scrapes that I recorded myself. So a lot of these types of tension cues start with really low drones, like low rumbles. And I wanted to do the opposite. I actually wanted to start with this really high, eerie sound, this high pad, before we brought in the low sounds, because so many of these types of cues starts with low rumbles. And so right out of the gate, I bring in the primary driver. This I called them whomes. I think I've actually seen that in stems as whomes. Whom. And these whomes, which I can control the amount of distortion with the mod wheel. And so I'm also, in addition to the mod wheel, opening the filter, opening the whomes, also bending the pitches forward. All right, so you can see how many of the whomes, mod wheel and pitch bend, go kind of hand in hand, which was admittedly a little tricky, with my mod wheel. I'm holding down the notes and trying to like push the pitch bend and the mod wheel at the same time on the keyboard. And so those are the whomes that come in. I do have these tracks frozen in Logic just because it's so much omnisphere, and I want to avoid as many clicking and pops and that kind of thing as well. Brought in some these low impacts, which are just these alternating low, delayed, echoey, low subpulses. Here are some reverse and swell effects from Damage 2 on top of a cymbal scrape, or a bowed cymbal. With these types of arrangements, it's really important, especially when you're dealing with these drone arrangements where there's not a ton of harmonic motion to help kind of give music editors or video editors edit points. It's important that you still, even if it's just internally, keep a phrase structure happening, keep some sort of consistent, symmetrical, as much as possible, phrasing structure that an editor can use to find hit points. It also will show up on the waveform and that kind of thing. So I have a lot of call and response here. So the whom comes in, and then the pluck, and then the impact. So it's somewhat predictable. And I'm still thinking in kind of 4-bar chunks. If I looked at my phrasing here, I have this phrase, that phrase, I bring in the impact, so it's kind of a 4-bar intro, and then I bring in these next layers, start increasing the bending, and then here at the end of this first section, then I bring in this pulsing pad. I add a layer on top, or an additional note on top of this. And that is building. Has some risers and a second cymbal effect. And this cymbal effect here is actually, oops, let me solo it. This is one of these little rubber balls on a stick. These are made by Mike Balter. They're called like friction mallets, and so you can take the friction mallet and get this kind of really creepy sound. It's really creepy, and then I pitched it down a little bit. Throw on tons of reverb and delay, stack them on top of all of this with the reverse effects, and you get this really intense push because I'm pushing into, well, kind of a breakdown, but I'm introducing one of the primary rhythmic elements. If it's the hook, I'm using air quotes for that. Enter the drums, big sub impact, and this guitar pulse. So I'm letting those whomes kind of go away for two phrases, which is kind of the breakdown mentality that I incorporate. Somewhere around in the middle, around the minute mark or so, I'm going to pull away my primary melody, usually bring in something else, and then layer them later. So it's like an A, a B, and then an A plus B type of arrangement. I do this all the time. Now, the impacts, the whomes, come back in. This time they're every 2 measures instead of every 4 measures. These impacts are getting more. I've added some damaged drums. Then I added another whome octave above it. And these are getting really whomy as well. And then everything comes to this final button. Now, mixing these can be somewhat of a challenge because you have so much low end all floating around, and I can't really, because they're frozen, I can't see these EQs. But going in there and choosing, okay, who gets to be like the lowest of low, and then who gets to be on top of that, and creating complementary EQ curves so all of the EQs all kind of mesh together. It's a real challenge, but also allowing and being okay with certain levels of distortion. And I had a lot of fun. I'm going to be writing, the client has ordered a total of 6, so I'm going to be writing 5 more of these types of cues. And so it's going to be more reference work. It's going to be really diving into my libraries and my patches and finding new sounds that I've really not explored before and figuring out how to incorporate them, but still adhering to the library structure and form that I'm pretty familiar with already. But I really enjoyed writing this, and I'm looking forward to writing more of these. I'm absolutely looking forward to writing more of these. So I hope that was cool and helpful to see. And I really appreciate you hanging out with me on a Monday or Tuesday or whatever day that you are checking this out. Like I mentioned earlier, please, well, first of all, thank you to my patrons. Thank you to the folks that subscribe and like. You can do that below. We will have another Thursday music production live stream. I'm not exactly sure what type of cue we're writing. We might be writing one of these. I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're writing one of these. I will be wrapping up the Thomas Newman inspired cue that we started last Thursday. I'm going to be wrapping that up this evening. And so, yeah, and thanks again to all the folks that hung out for the Feedback Friday that we had last week. So that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much. I wish you a happy week 12, and enjoy the writing. And if you have any questions, comments, or anything, you can hit me in the YouTube below, or the comments below. Until next time, peace.